Well, Star Wars Outlaws was primed to be the next big Star Wars game, and I say was because it just continues to look worse and worse. It had quickly climbed to the top of my list of most anticipated games for 2024, and I didn't feel like I was alone in my excitement for this game when it showed up in 2023 at the Ubisoft Forward event. I argued that it sort of stole the week during Summer Game Fest. I felt it was the strongest showing. The gameplay trailer was 10 minutes, and they showed a nice variety of gameplay. You honestly have to remember everything they showed us because you need to compare it to what we're seeing now. We saw the main character sort of stealthily sneaking around with her companion helping her. She got into shootouts with multiple enemies. The sound design and the blasters sounded great. We even got into a melee brawl in the fights with the character. And then she hops on a speeder before engaging in a pretty extensive driving sequence, and there's vehicular combat. And we get to see a cutscene when she arrives at the cantina, and it feels very much like the Star Wars movies. I even found interviews where the developers were attempting to emulate the camera lenses from the 1970s. It's why it has such a great vibe and feel in these scenes. And then the character is presented with a narrative choice, and that actually leads to them having to leave the planet rather quickly, and it's capstoned with space combat and dogfights. And not only that, it leads to a fan moment that we will all recognize, the jump to light speed. This jam-packed trailer was well received. It was combed over. Everybody was excited for this game. But the feeling surrounding this game changed earlier in 2024 when the trailers started dropping. Faces and facial animations looked significantly altered or degraded. Lighting and graphics showed signs of optimization struggles. Fans started to worry that we were seeing the beginnings of another graphical degradation situation. And those concerns have increased with brand new footage from IGN. They have 10 minutes of exclusive footage, and I want to break it down. Now, every weekday here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then we go to a live stream where I want to hear what you think. So if you like what you see, hit like and subscribe. So the latest Star Wars Outlaws gameplay comes to us from IGN. In the 10 minutes of exclusive gameplay, we get a glimpse into the expert missions and how they will play. Now, I'm going to go into the details about the expert missions later, but for now, I want to talk about why I did not come away from this gameplay with a positive reaction. There is a lot that just does not look good, but rather than just say, hey, it looks bad, I want to point out specific things and describe why I think they look degraded or worse than when the game first showed up. So first, let's just talk about Kay Vess's face, okay? Everybody's talking about how, oh, she's ugly, they made her ugly. I actually don't think that's what's going on. The first thing I noticed was her eyes. They sort of dart around randomly, and they have that sort of strange, flat, dead-eyed stare feel to them. And when you combine that with the awkward eyebrow movement and what looks like a one-eyed skeptical squint that she tries to do, it's about like a minute and a half into the trailer, it just looks off-putting. It doesn't really land in a weird valley where something maybe looks a little bit too real while also looking fake. It feels closer to a plastic, almost puppet-like appearance. I've seen comparisons to the Team America World Police movie with the puppets, and I just can't unsee it. If you go to the original trailer, when Kay Vess was first shown after sort of petting her little companion, she looks softer in her features. She looks more realistic. Now, again, I don't think they made her ugly. I think this engine is struggling with facial animations. In the other trailer, I felt many of the faces looked awkward, hair looked flat and non-distinct. Now, granted, her eyes in the original trailer, they still have that sort of distant stare feel to them, but she feels less like a mannequin or a puppet. And the frustrating thing about this is that the protocol droid head, the R2 units, and the Jawas in the latest footage, I think it all looks great. If you bump the trailer to 1440 resolution or 4K, you can really see the level of detail in the Jawa's clothing, and then there's sort of this nice metallic shine on the droids. So it creates this awful juxtaposition where the main character looks sort of busted and out of place. Next, let's just talk about the animations that are not on her face. Her hand and body movements when talking to the Jawa, they're not really bad, and neither is her walking around. The speeding, the getting off and on the speeder, the jogging, I think it all looks fine. But everything starts to go south when the thermal detonator comes up and she gets blasted forward. I genuinely am shocked that they included this. there is a stiffness to the entire thing. It almost feels old gen. This leads to a combat sequence, and I want to talk specifically about the combat. Before I do, just the animations during the fights, I want to talk about how they have this sort of rigid feel to them, okay? She goes into and out of a slide, and she has this sort of running and jogging that she's doing, and it just feels very rigid. Now, I hope this is less noticeable when playing. Sometimes games look awkward or they lack fluidity when you're sort of watching someone stream it, but then when you play it, it does feel better because it really just does not look fluid, okay? So let's talk about the combat. They showcase a variety of things that she can do. She can shoot environmental objects like barrels or a hanging barrel. She can sort of blind fire from cover, which I actually think looks nice. She can also sort of aim down sight for more precise shooting. She also finds a grenade launcher, and she uses it to great effect, both up close and far away. And none of this looks bad. It just really feels like they are trying to make combat look dynamic and emergent, which doesn't concern me because that kind of gameplay is fun. But it very much felt like they were really trying to portray combat in a certain way rather than just letting the combat flow naturally. When you combine this with the graphical downgrade, I get concerned that they are trying to dress the game's combat up to make it look better than it actually is. I hope I'm wrong about this because I do think it looks fun, but it really made my spidey sense tingle with how they packaged it. Alright, lastly, the graphics, the textures, and the lighting. Numerous times throughout the latest footage, there is dust, smoke, and other particle effects that look very disconnected from the environment. When she lands at the bottom of the Sarlacc pit, this is a very good example. The dust that pops up is black for some reason, and it just sort of appears in a jittery animation and then disappears. And some may say that this is nitpicky, but remember, this game debuted and looked very polished, and it looked very next gen. Now, a lot of the game just looks rough. It looks unpolished. Then later, when she's walking toward a tooth and she's sort of stepping in some shallow water, the ripple effect is so uniform, it honestly looks like she's broadcasting Wi-Fi in the water. It sort of pulses in a way that is jarring and immediately noticeable. Then, if we go back to the infamous thermal detonator explosion, the cloud of smoke behind her and the explosion just look awful. It's so bad, it's almost comical. I'm at a loss for why some of these things look so bad. This is the second trailer to feature just odd lighting effects as well. When she's leaving the dark area and light sort of breaking through a crack and she has to climb through it, before she gets there, there's these sort of fat bands of light. It's almost like a fat band of lens flare that comes through. A previous trailer had similar issues with the lighting when you were sort of inside and looking outside where the sunlight was. It just looks terrible. Now, I don't know if this is their effort to emulate 1970s camera lenses just sort of going awry, but it's distractingly bad when it happens. It was especially bad in that official gameplay showcase that they showed just this year during Ubisoft Forward. So around the 8-minute and 23 mark, if you want to go watch it on your own in your own video and not in mine. So I can't help but say, here we go again. Whenever the words Ubisoft and graphical downgrade are in proximity with each other, everybody thinks of one game, Watch Dogs. So I want to be sure to say something without hesitation. This does not look anywhere near as bad as what happened with Watch Dogs. I feel that we are primarily seeing the limitations of the engine, specifically with respect to facial animations and just the sort of the moment-to-moment fluidity. Even when she gets off of her speeder, when she first gets to sort of the Sarlacc area, there is a moment where she just kind of stops and she stands there and then you can control her. Little things like this, I think, just signal to me that we are dealing with engine level limitations, which is obviously concerning, but also not concerning. First, it's concerning because it could mean that the engine is feeling its age, and it will prevent the game from feeling truly next-gen. But secondly, it's not concerning because I think The Division 2 looks and feels really great in a lot of its areas, so I know the Snowdrop engine can deliver a good experience, even if the experience is not as great or polished as some of us were anticipating. But that leads to my word to the developers and publishers, as we continue to say this time and time again: Stop showing your games too early, which I don't feel like Star Wars Outlaws showed itself too early. It showed up roughly 1 year before its release date. So the second thing I really want to emphasize to gaming companies is stop showing gameplay that isn't raw, that isn't real, that's either been pre-rendered or simulated. It's just really annoying. All it does is hurt the reception of the game when it finally launches. However, in spite of all of this, I actually am still hopeful about this game. I honestly think the game looks fun. Is it rough around the edges? Sure, but fun, yes, it definitely looks good. And the size and the scope of what you can do honestly sounds thoughtful and well designed. As an example, I said I wanted to talk about the expert missions. Well, instead of getting XP and watching the character level up and fill out a skill tree, you do these things called expert missions instead, which gives you purpose to side quests and side missions. It feels contextual to a game where, as a scoundrel, you would learn tricks of the trade from other scum and villainy in the underbelly of the Star Wars universe. But it also removes the awkward feeling of like the busy work of when you're doing a fetch quest or the busy work of interacting with some inconsequential character. Now those characters matter. It adds meaning to the world, your abilities, and it creates a touch of immersion that makes the off-beaten path ventures more impactful and worth doing. And even though the graphics aren't quite as nice as they once were, I have to admit, the game looks and feels like Star Wars. It has the gritty, worn-down feeling, but it also has a decent amount of fan service with things like talking to Jawas or jumping down into a Sarlacc pit. At the end of the day, I can get over minor graphical issues like pop-in or awkward animations or jittery water and smoke animations. Just give me consistent performance. That is how I felt about Jedi Survivor. It was not the prettiest or most polished game, but once they fixed performance mode on the console, I thoroughly enjoyed my playthrough of the game. And I really hope that I can add Star Wars Outlaws to that list. But those are just my thoughts, and now it's time to hear your thoughts. And you can do that in a comment below or come to the live stream. It'll be here on a card. It'll also hit a pinned comment below. And if you like this content and want more like it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe.